Two children knocked on the door of a motorcycle clubhouse at 2 in the morning. The older one, a girl of 12, said 3 words that stopped every man in that room cold. "Hide us, please." Behind her stood her 7-year-old brother, shaking so hard he could barely stand. What they were hiding from wasn't a bully. It wasn't a stranger. It was something that had been hunting them for 4 days. Something with resources, connections, and the specific patience of people who believed they were untouchable. The 67 bikers who heard those 3 words had no idea what they were walking into. Neither did the children. But by the end of that week, this small town in central Tennessee would never be the same. And neither would the men who answered the door. The door of the ironclad MC Clubhouse on Route 7 was made of solid steel. It had been installed 6 years ago by a man named Garrison Wade, who was the chapter's founder and who had believed, based on 40 years of operating in spaces where solid doors mattered, that a door you could not easily get through was a door worth having. It was painted black. It had a peephole. It had a deadbolt and a secondary bolt and a bar across the inside that could be dropped in situations that required it. On the outside, it looked exactly like what it was, the entrance to a place that took its boundaries seriously. On the inside, on a Thursday night in October at 2:14 in the morning, 31 men were winding down after a chapter meeting. The meeting had ended at midnight. Most of them were on their 2nd or 3rd beer, and the room had the specific quality of people in the middle of the transition from business to belonging, the shift from the formal exchange of chapter matters to the informal exchange of people who had been in each other's lives for a long time. When the knock came, nobody heard it at first. The room was full. The jukebox in the corner was playing something classic. Several conversations were happening simultaneously. The bar at the back of the room, tended by a man named Drew, who was the chapter's unofficial keeper of drinks and mood, was doing steady business. The second knock was louder. Not louder because the person was knocking harder. Louder because the specific sound of fists on steel at 2 in the morning cut through things differently than most sounds. There was something in the cadence of it. Quick, 3-3-3, the rhythm of urgency that reached through the noise of the room. The man nearest the door was Garrison Wade himself. He was 61 years old. He had founded the Ironclad chapter 17 years ago in a town called Mill Haven, Tennessee, population 12,000, and he had built it into something that was, by any objective measure, a presence in the community in ways that had surprised people who had first looked at the leather and the bikes and made their assumptions. He was tall, 6'2", with a white beard and the kind of stillness that came from decades of being the person who decided things. His eyes were the particular blue of cold water, and they were currently fixed on the door. He went to it, he looked through the peephole. He stood at the peephole for approximately 2 seconds. Then he unlocked all 3 locks and opened the door. The girl was 12 years old. This was the first thing he registered, not the specific details of her, but her age, the ageness of her. The fact of a 12-year-old standing in the doorway of his clubhouse at 2 in the morning, with the specific expression of someone who had used up everything they had and were running on the last reserves of something that was not quite hope, but was adjacent to it. She was tall for 12, 5'4", maybe 5'5", with dark red hair pulled back in a braid that had come partly loose. She had green eyes and freckles, and a face that had the unfinished quality of someone still growing into themselves. She was wearing a jacket that was good quality, the kind that had been expensive when it was bought, but was dirty in the way of someone who had been wearing it without a break for several days. Behind her was a boy, 7 maybe, with the same dark red hair and his sister's green eyes and the specific shaking of a child who had been cold and afraid for too long. He was holding the girl's hand with both of his. He had a backpack on. She had a backpack too. They were standing on the porch of the Ironclad MC Clubhouse at 2:14 in the morning in October, and the girl looked at Garrison Wade and she said, "Hide us, please." Garrison Wade had been in situations. He had the specific biography of a man who had spent 40 years navigating spaces where things went wrong. He had been in situations that required clear thinking under pressure, in situations where the wrong decision had costs that were not abstract, in situations where he had seen people at their worst and at their absolute best, and where he had learned to read the difference. He read the girl. He read her in approximately 3 seconds. He stepped back from the door and he said, "Come in." They came in. The room changed. This was the thing that people who weren't there would ask about later. How a room of 31 men, the kind of men who occupied this specific room at this specific hour, could change in the space of two children walking through a door. But it did change. The way rooms changed when something fundamentally altered the nature of the moment, when the social weather shifted from one system to another. Conversations stopped. The jukebox was not turned off, but nobody heard it anymore. 31 men looked at the two children standing in the middle of the ironclad MC clubhouse. Garrison Wade looked at the girl. "What's your name?" he said. "Scarlett," she said. "Scarlett Voss. This is my brother Henry." Henry was still shaking. He was looking at the room with the specific assessment of a 7-year-old who had learned to assess rooms for danger and was running the calculation. "What are you hiding from, Scarlett?" Garrison said. She looked at him. She looked at the room, 31 men in leather cuts, gray and weathered and various, the full spectrum of the kind of people who were in this room at this hour on a Thursday night. She looked back at Garrison. "It's complicated," she said. "Then sit down," Garrison said, "and tell us the complicated version." A man named Bernard Holt brought her water. Bernard was 47, one of the chapter's longest-serving members, a man who fixed appliances for a living and had the specific quality of someone whose work required them to diagnose problems before solving them. He brought her water without being asked, and he brought a second glass for Henry, and then he stepped back and sat down in his chair and folded his hands and listened. The room, without being organized, had arranged itself around the two children, not closing in, giving space. The specific arrangement of people who understood that the space they gave was the space being offered. Scarlett drank the water. She looked at Garrison. She told the story. The story started 4 days ago, which was Sunday. She and Henry lived with their father, a man named Thomas Voss, in a house on Millhaven's east side. Their mother had died 3 years earlier. She said it the way children said it when the death was old enough to be fact rather than fresh wound, with the flat acceptance of a thing that was true and unchangeable. Their father was a good father. He worked in accountancy, private accountancy, the kind where you kept the books for businesses that needed their books kept well. 4 days ago on Sunday, their father had come home from a meeting and told them to pack 2 bags each. He had told them to pack only what they could carry and to pack quickly. He had told them they were going to their aunt's house. He was scared, Scarlett said. "My dad is not scared. He's never, in my whole life, I've never seen him scared. And he was scared." She and Henry had packed. Their father had driven them to their Aunt Donna's house, which was 40 miles away. He had not come in. He had pulled up in front and said to Scarlett, "Take care of your brother. Don't call me. Don't call anyone on your regular phone. If you need to reach me, use this." He had given her a prepaid phone. A burner phone. She knew what it was. She was 12 and smart and knew what it was. "Don't tell anyone where you are. Don't tell Donna anything except that you need to stay for a few days." "What's happening?" she'd asked. He'd looked at her. "I found something," he said. "In the books. I wasn't supposed to find it. The people whose books I found it in, they know I found it." He'd held her face with both hands. "The police are involved. There are people who are going to help. But for right now, I need you to be safe, and I need you to stay with Donna." He'd driven away. She had not heard from him since. "That was Sunday," Scarlett said. "We were at Aunt Donna's for 2 days. Monday and Tuesday were okay. She didn't know what was happening, but she kept us busy and Henry was okay." She looked at Henry, who had stopped shaking slightly. Not stopped completely, but less. "Tuesday night, 2 men came to Donna's house. The room was very still. They said they were police," she said. "They showed badges. Donna let them in. They asked about us, where we'd come from, when Dad had dropped us off. Donna told them." She paused. "After they left, I called Dad on the burner phone." "He answered?" Garrison said. "He answered," she said. "He sounded different. Scared different. Not the Sunday scared. More scared." She looked at her hands. "He said the 2 men weren't police. He said the badges were real, but the men weren't working in an official capacity. He said..." She stopped. She took a breath. "He said there were people in the police department who were involved in what he'd found. He said we needed to move. He told me to take Henry and go somewhere nobody would look for us. He said to stay away from anything official. Don't call the regular police. Don't go to a government building. Stay somewhere that was..." She stopped. "Off the grid," Garrison said. "He said go somewhere that was..." "He said go somewhere where people kept their own counsel," she said. "I didn't know exactly what he meant at first, but I thought about it, and I thought..." She looked around the room, at the leather and the patches and the 31 men who kept their own counsel by definition. I thought about this. Garrison Wade looked at her. You thought about coming here, he said. I've lived in Millhaven my whole life, she said. I know who the Ironclad are. I know. She paused. I know what people say about you. But I also know what I've seen. I've seen the toys you bring in December. I've seen the work you did with the shelter last year. I've seen... She stopped. My dad has talked about you. He said the Ironclad were the kind of people who were fair, who kept their word. Who... She ran out of words. She looked at her hands. I didn't have anywhere else to go, she said. That was the truth. I walked from the motel. We've been at the Liberty Motel on Route 9 since Wednesday. I paid cash. I took the emergency money from Dad's lockbox at home before we left. I walked here because I couldn't think of anywhere else. The room was quiet. Henry was looking at Garrison. Are we safe here? Henry said. His voice was small and exact. Garrison Wade looked at the 7-year-old. Yes, he said. Henry nodded. Once. He put his head on his sister's shoulder. He closed his eyes. Garrison looked at the room. The room looked at him. They had been in this chapter together for various lengths of time, some of them for the full 17 years, some for less, some for only a few years. And they had developed the specific communication of people who had been in situations together and had established, through the working of those situations, a shared vocabulary for certain things. The shared vocabulary said, this is real and this is ours, and we're going to handle it. He looked at a man named Raymond Briggs, who was 44, and who had been, before the club, a police officer for 9 years. Raymond had left the force under circumstances that had been described at the time as voluntary, and that were more accurately described as principled. There had been a situation, an internal situation, and Raymond had made a choice about it that had cost him the job and earned him something he valued more. Raymond was already looking at him. Get Patrick on the phone, Garrison said. Patrick Walsh was the chapter's lawyer. Raymond was already reaching for his phone. Get everyone in, Garrison said. Everyone who's not here. I want them here by 3. The room moved. There were 67 members of the Ironclad chapter. 31 were already in the building. By 3:15 in the morning, with phone calls radiating out into the October dark, and engines on Route 7, and cars in the parking lot, and the specific organized chaos of 67 people assembling in a space that held them because the space had been designed for exactly this kind of need. By 3:15, 63 had arrived. The remaining 4 were accounted for. 2 were in Nashville for work and were on the road, estimated arrival 4:30. 1 was in Memphis at his sister's hospital. He was excused and was briefed by phone. 1 was at the county hospital with his wife, who was in labor with their 3rd child, and was excused and would receive a full briefing in the morning. 67 people in various states of having been woken up and having driven to a clubhouse in the middle of the night, and 67 people in the specific state of having been told something was wrong and having come. Scarlett sat in the front of the room and she watched them come. She watched 67 people arrive because Garrison Wade had said, get everyone in, and everyone came. She did not say anything. She sat with Henry, who had fallen asleep against her side, and she watched. At some point, a woman named Connie, who was the chapter's bookkeeper and who had arrived in sweatpants and a leather cut over a hoodie with her reading glasses pushed up on her head, had brought a blanket for Henry. He was asleep under it. She had also brought food. Sandwiches, made from what was in the clubhouse kitchen, which was a better stocked kitchen than Scarlett had expected. Connie sat with Scarlett while the men assembled. She did not ask questions. She sat with her and offered food and stayed. The specific staying of someone who understood that company was what was needed, and that the form the company took was not complicated. Are you really not scared? Connie said at one point. She said it not as challenge, but as genuine inquiry. Scarlett looked at the assembled room. I'm scared, she said. I'm scared of what's happening to my dad. I'm scared of the people who came to Donna's house. I'm scared of... She stopped. I'm less scared right now than I have been in 4 days. For the first time since Sunday night. Connie looked at the room. Good, she said. Garrison stood at the front of the room at 3:30. 63 people looked at him. 4 more were on their way. He told the story. He told it exactly as Scarlett had told it to him. Without addition, without interpretation. as a factual account of what a 12-year-old girl had told him at 2 in the morning after walking from the Liberty Motel on Route 9. The room listened. "What do we know?" Garrison said when he'd finished. Raymond Briggs stood up. He had been working his phone for the past hour. He had the Notes app open and the specific organized quality of a man who had been trained to gather and organize information quickly. "Thomas Voss," Raymond said, 42 years old, accountant, self-employed for 6 years, before that at Meridian Accounting Group. He does books for about 22 businesses in the county. I can't tell you which of those businesses is the specific client in question without more information. He found something in the books, a man named Gary said from the middle of the room. Gary was the chapter's treasurer. He did their own books, had for 12 years. Accountants find things all the time. What kind of thing produces this specific response? "Money laundering," said a man named Stewart from the back. He was 38 and had spent 4 years as a federal agent before an injury had ended that career and sent him in a different direction. Or worse, something that involves law enforcement corruption. That's the thing that makes you not go to the regular police. You only use burner phones and tell your kids to hide with motorcycle clubs when there's a layer inside official channels that can't be trusted. The room absorbed this. "The 2 men who came to the aunt's house," Garrison said. "Real badges, wrong purpose." "Classic," Stewart said. "Real badges means real people on a department's payroll. Wrong purpose means they're running an errand that's off the books. Could be direct involvement. Could be they're being used by someone higher who knows what to leverage." A man named Victor said, "The father, Thomas Voss, has he gone to any official channels?" Raymond. "He said he was going to. He told Scarlett the police were involved, meaning the right police, presumably. But if there's corruption inside the department, trusting the process is complicated." "Where is the father now?" someone asked. Silence. Garrison looked at Scarlett. She had been listening with the focused attention that was apparently her default setting. "I don't know," she said. "He stopped answering Tuesday night. After he told me to move. I've called twice. No answer." The room heard this. "The burner phone," Stewart said. "Does he know how to use it safely? Did he use a prepaid with cash?" "I don't know," Scarlett said. "He gave me one. I don't know about his." Stewart nodded. He was processing. "Patrick," Garrison said. Patrick Walsh was the chapter's lawyer, 49, with the specific quality of a lawyer who had spent his career doing work that mattered and had gotten very good at the intersection of law and the kind of situations that didn't have clean legal solutions. "This is a complicated legal landscape," Patrick said. "If there's legitimate law enforcement involvement, if someone at the department is legitimately working the situation, we want to be careful about interfering. On the other hand, if the child's account is accurate, there are bad actors with access to official channels, and going through those channels creates risk." "So what do we do?" Gary said. "We protect the children," Patrick said. "That's not complicated. 2 minors came to us in the middle of the night saying they were in danger. We protect them. Everything else gets figured out around that." "And the father?" Garrison said. Patrick looked at him. "We find him," Patrick said. At 4 in the morning, Garrison pulled a chair up to Scarlett and sat across from her. She had eaten Connie's sandwich methodically, with the focused attention of someone who understood that eating was a physical requirement. Henry was still asleep. Garrison looked at her. "I want to ask you some questions," he said, "about your father's work." "I'll tell you what I know," she said. "The clients," he said. "Your father does books for 22 businesses. Do you know any of them? Did he ever mention clients?" She thought about it with the seriousness she brought to all things. "He didn't usually talk about work at home," she said. "It was his rule, work at the office, home at home." She paused. "But I heard things, names that came up, Meridian Properties. He did their books. I know that because he mentioned a specific problem once that he was proud of solving." Raymond was writing. "Goldbridge Logistics," she said. "They were a new client this year. He was excited about them. They were a good contract." Raymond wrote. "One more," she said. She was thinking. "There was one he mentioned once, and then he said something I remember because it was strange. He said, some clients you take because you need the work, and some clients teach you things you'd rather not know. I asked him what he meant and he changed the subject." "Did he name the client?" Garrison said. She thought hard. "Castellan," she said. "Castellan something. I'm not sure of the full name." Raymond and Stewart exchanged a look. Garrison saw it. "You know the name." he said to them. Stewart was already on his phone. Castellan Capital Group, Stewart said. I've heard the name. In a different context, a long time ago. He looked at Garrison. If it's the same one, they had a federal investigation that went nowhere about 8 years ago. Insufficient evidence, no charges. But the investigators who worked it at the time, he paused. They said the evidence didn't disappear. It got lost. Lost, Garrison said. In the specific way that evidence gets lost when the right person is told to lose it, Stewart said. The room was quiet. Garrison looked at Scarlett. Your father's a good man, he said. She looked at him. I know, she said. He found something that someone has been making sure for 8 years nobody found, Garrison said. And he did the right thing with it. And now he's in trouble for doing the right thing. She held his gaze. Where is he? She said. We're going to find out, Garrison said. By 5 in the morning, the chapter had divided into functional groups. Stewart was running the information side. He had contacts from his federal years, people he trusted, people outside the local loop. He was making calls from a room at the back with the door closed. Raymond was running the local reconnaissance, driving by Thomas Voss's office on Garrison Street, driving by the house on the east side, noting what was there and what wasn't. Patrick was on the phone with a lawyer he knew at the federal level, someone who dealt specifically with situations involving local law enforcement corruption, someone who had dealt with Castellan Capital Group's name in a professional context before. The remaining 50-some members were doing what they were doing, keeping the building secure, keeping watch, being present. Someone made more food. Someone found a proper air mattress and set it up in the back office for Henry, who was carried to it still sleeping and did not wake up. Scarlett refused to sleep. Garrison sat with her in the main room. How long have you been awake? He said. I don't know, she said. A few days. You need to sleep. I need to know about my father, she said. You need both, he said. And the knowing about your father is being handled by people who are very good at it. Sleep is only handled by sleeping. She looked at him. Are you always this direct? She said. Pretty much, he said. She almost smiled. Not quite, but the architecture of a smile was briefly visible. My dad is like that, she said. He sounds like a sensible man, Garrison said. He's the best man I know, she said. Tell me about him, Garrison said. She looked at him. Why? Because you've been carrying the worry about him alone for 4 days, he said. And because talking about someone is sometimes better than worrying about them in silence. She looked at the table. She stopped, started again. He's the kind of person who does things properly, she said. Not perfectly, he makes mistakes. But when he makes a mistake, he says so and he fixes it. He doesn't pretend. He's been like that since Mom died. She paused. When she died, some dads would have, I don't know, fallen apart, or pretended nothing was different. He did neither. He just kept being. He kept being honest. He said, this is really hard, and I'm scared, and I love you, and we're going to get through it. Garrison listened. He says what's true, she said. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She looked at her hands. He found something true in those books, and instead of not saying anything, which would have been safe, he did what he always does. He said it. Garrison was quiet. That's rare, he said. I know, she said. It's worth fighting for, he said. She met his eyes. Yes, she said. Get some sleep, he said. I'll wake you up the minute we know something. She looked at the back room where Henry was sleeping. Okay, she said. The breakthrough came at 7:15 in the morning. It came through Patrick's contact at the federal level, a woman named Daphne Ross who practiced in Nashville and who had been for the past 18 months, building a case that intersected in specific ways with the name Castellan Capital Group. Daphne Ross knew about Thomas Voss. She knew about him because he had, in fact, done the right thing. He had contacted a specific contact at a federal level, bypassing local entirely, on Sunday evening. He had provided documentation. He had provided accounts. He had provided what Daphne Ross described to Patrick as the most complete and damning financial record I have ever been handed in 20 years of practice. He was in protective custody. Federal protective custody, not local, federal. Which was why the men with the real badges who weren't working in an official capacity had not found him. He was safe. Patrick came to Garrison with this. Garrison went to the back room where Scarlett was asleep on the couch with a second blanket someone had found. He stood in the doorway. He thought about waking her. He stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at her sleeping. 12 years old, the braid fully loose now, the freckles across her nose, the face finally doing what children's faces were supposed to do when they slept, which was nothing, which was simply rest. He woke her gently. She came awake the way she'd been doing everything, immediately, completely, the sleep gone the moment consciousness arrived. She looked at him. She read his face. "He's okay," she said. It was not a question. "He's safe," Garrison said. "Federal protection. He's been there since Sunday." She held his gaze. Then she closed her eyes. She put her hands over her face. She was 12 years old, and she had been holding the weight of 4 days without knowing if her father was alive, and the weight left now, and the leaving of it was not graceful or quiet or composed. She cried in the specific way of someone finally allowed to cry, the way you cried when the thing you'd been holding back had finally been let out. Garrison sat beside her. He did not say anything. He sat there, this 61-year-old man with a white beard and a lifetime's worth of difficult situations, and he let the 12-year-old cry. Henry woke up at 7:45. He came out of the back office with his hair askew and his eyes doing the morning recalibration of a 7-year-old reconstructing where he was and why. He saw the room. He saw Garrison. He saw his sister, who had stopped crying and was now in the specific state of someone who has been through something large and was sitting with the aftermath. "Is Dad okay?" Henry said. "Dad's okay," Scarlett said. Henry processed this. He sat down on the floor. He looked at the room. 63 people in various states of a long night, coffee cups and the debris of food and the specific condition of people who had been up all night doing something that mattered. "Did all these people help us?" Henry said. "Yes," Scarlett said. Henry looked at the room. "Thank you," he said. To the room, to all of it. The room had the specific quality of 63 people receiving a thank you from a 7-year-old and not knowing what to do with it except be in it. Garrison looked at Henry. "You're welcome," he said. By 8 in the morning, the chapter had a plan. The plan had been developed by Patrick and Daphne Ross on a phone call that had lasted 45 minutes, and that had involved, on Patrick's end, the specific legal creativity of someone who understood both the formal system and the spaces around it. The formal situation: Thomas Voss was in federal protective custody. The investigation into Castellan Capital Group was active. The corruption within the local police department was being investigated by a federal task force, had been for the past week since Thomas's documentation had arrived. The men who had come to Donna's house were known to the federal investigators and were under surveillance. The informal situation: Scarlett and Henry were in a motorcycle clubhouse in Millhaven, Tennessee. They could not go to the East Side house. They could not go to Donna's. They could not go to school. They needed to be somewhere they were genuinely safe, with genuine people, for an indeterminate period while the formal situation resolved. Daphne Ross had said, "The children need to stay off the map for a few more days. If the people targeting Thomas get wind that his children have been found." She hadn't finished the sentence. She hadn't needed to. Garrison had said, "They stay with us." Daphne Ross had said, "Are you sure that's appropriate?" Garrison had said, "I'm sure they're safe here. Appropriate is a word for other situations." Daphne Ross had paused. Then she'd said, "Okay." 3 things happened simultaneously at 8 in the morning that shaped the next 4 days. First, Garrison called a woman named Ruth Alderman, who was the chapter's community coordinator, the person who managed the club's relationship with the town, who knew the town's people and the town's rhythms with the specific knowledge of someone who had been paying attention for 20 years. Ruth was 63 and had the quality of someone who had navigated a great deal of difficulty with the specific tool of practical wisdom. He explained the situation in broad strokes. 2 children, specific danger, need to stay off the map. Ruth said, "What do they need?" "A child-appropriate environment for a few days," he said. "Someone who knows how to handle children." "I'll be there in an hour," she said. Second, Stewart received a call from one of his federal contacts, an agent named Whitmore, who had been part of the Castellan investigation and who had been alerted by Daphne Ross that the founder of the Ironclad MC was providing sanctuary for the accountant's children. Whitmore's response had been, "Tell them to stay put. Tell them not to move the children. And tell that MC president that we're aware and we're grateful." Stewart had relayed this. Garrison had nodded. Third, Gary, the chapter treasurer, had gone to the corner store on Garrison Street and come back with an inventory of things that a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old might need over the next several days, which he'd assembled with the specific practical attention of someone who had 3 children of his own and knew what the list looked like. He came back with a bag that contained, among other things, a stuffed animal for Henry, because Gary had a 7-year-old, and he knew what 7-year-olds needed when they were scared, and 2 books for Scarlett because he'd seen her looking at the shelves. He put the bag on the table. Henry looked at the stuffed animal, a large, slightly absurd-looking bear with a red bow tie. He picked it up. He looked at Gary. "What's his name?" Henry said. Gary looked at the bear. "Whatever you want," Gary said. Henry looked at the bear with the seriousness of someone making an important naming decision. "Gerald," he said. "Gerald is a good name," Gary said. Henry nodded. Gerald was named. The next 4 days had the quality of a thing that was 2 things simultaneously. On the surface, they were the days of practical management, of keeping 2 children safe, of feeding them and giving them space, and managing the specific psychological reality of children in a stressful situation who needed as much normal as could be manufactured. They were the days of rotating watches and the careful intelligence operation that Stuart was running, and the legal work that Patrick was doing, and the communication with Daphne Ross and the federal investigators. Underneath, they were something else. They were the days in which 67 people discovered that having 2 children in a clubhouse changed the specific quality of the place in ways none of them had anticipated. Henry discovered the jukebox on Thursday morning. He discovered it in the way 7-year-olds discovered things that made sounds, completely, with full commitment, without moderation. He played the same 3 songs 7 times each before Connie gently introduced the concept of variety, and the concept of variety opened a conversation about music that went on for 45 minutes and ended with Henry having opinions about classic rock that were considered and specific. He also discovered the pool table. Gary taught him to shoot pool on Thursday afternoon. This required a stool and patience and the specific adjustment of expectations that came with teaching a 7-year-old anything. But Gary had the patience for it, and Henry had the focus for it, and by Friday, Henry could make approximately 1 in 6 shots, which Gary declared a record for first-day pool learning. Henry carried Gerald everywhere. He had, in the way of children who had been through difficulty and had been given something to hold, bonded with the red bow-tied bear in the specific complete way of someone who needed something constant and had found it. Scarlett watched all of this from a distance. She was not unguarded. She was never unguarded. It was not her nature. But she watched her brother learn to shoot pool and name a bear, and navigate a room full of large men with the specific equanimity of a 7-year-old who had decided that the room was safe, and something in her watching it was different from the 4 days before. She was, by small degrees, putting down the weight. Ruth Alderman became the operational center of the children's time. Ruth was 63 and had been a school principal for 20 years before retirement, and the quality of someone who had managed children and crises and the intersection of the two was present in everything she did. She was warm in the specific, non-patronizing way of someone who respected children as the full people they were. She talked to Scarlett as an equal. She did not condescend to Henry. She brought order to their days, meals at regular times, activity, rest, without making the order feel like management. She told Scarlett on Thursday afternoon, "You've been the parent for 4 days." "Yes," Scarlett said. "That's an enormous thing," Ruth said. "You did it well. You can stop now, just for a while. Be 12. Scarlett looked at her. "I don't know how to just be 12, she said. "I know," Ruth said. "Most 12-year-olds don't. But the way you learn is by practicing." She looked at the shelf of books. "What do you like to read?" Scarlett looked at the books. It was the first time since Sunday that someone had asked her what she liked, not what she needed, not what she knew, what she liked. She looked at the books for a moment. "History," she said. "I like history. Not the textbook kind, the narrative kind. The kind that tells you what people were thinking, not just what happened." Ruth looked at the shelf. She found, third from the left, a book about the American Civil War told through individual accounts. A narrative history, exactly the kind Scarlett had described. She handed it to her. Scarlett held it. She held it the way you held something that you'd been given when you needed it, without knowing you needed it. "Thank you," she said. She sat in the corner and she read. Garrison checked on them. He did it in the way he did everything, without announcement, without ceremony. He moved through the building in his natural rhythm, and when that rhythm brought him near Scarlett or Henry, he would pause and speak briefly, and then move on. He found Scarlett on Friday morning sitting at the table with the history book and a notebook making notes. Writing in the margins. No, not in the margins of the book, in her own notebook, the notebook she'd carried in her backpack. Writing observations. He sat across from her. She looked up. "You take notes while you read," he said. "I like to remember things," she said. "If I write them down, I remember them better." "That's a good practice," he said. "My dad taught me," she said. He looked at the notebook. "How are you doing?" he said. She thought about it. "Better," she said. "Every hour I know he's safe, better." "You'll see him soon," Garrison said. "Patrick's working on the specific arrangements. The federal protection is solid. The investigation is moving faster than these things usually move because your father gave them. He gave them everything," she said. "That's who he is. When he has something to give, he gives all of it." Garrison looked at her. "You're like him," he said. She looked at the notebook. "I hope so," she said. He stood up. "Henry needs someone for pool practice," he said. "Gary's busy." She looked toward the pool table where Henry was standing with Gerald and looking at the balls with the focused expression of someone considering a strategic problem. She closed the notebook. She went. The threat came on Saturday. Not the larger threat. The larger threat was being managed by federal investigators and Patrick and Daphne Ross. The specific threat came in a different form, from a direction that none of them had anticipated. It came in the form of a man named Cliff Sutton. Cliff Sutton was a county official. He ran the county's Office of Child Services, a position he had held for 11 years. He was 56 and had the kind of authority that came from being in a bureaucratic position long enough that the authority felt natural to him. Like furniture that had been in a room so long, everyone assumed it had always been there. He arrived at the ironclad clubhouse at 10 in the morning with 2 people from his office and a piece of paper. The paper was an emergency order. It stated that 2 minors, Scarlett and Henry Voss, had been located at the ironclad MC Clubhouse in Millhaven, Tennessee, and that per the county's emergency child welfare protocols, they were to be placed immediately in the county's emergency foster system pending location of a viable guardian. He knocked on the steel door. Bernard opened it. He read Cliff Sutton's paper. He said, "One moment." He closed the door. He went to find Garrison. Garrison read the paper. He read it twice. He looked at it with the specific attention of someone looking for the thing that was wrong, because something was wrong. He could feel it, the specific wrongness of official things that were not what they looked like. He called Patrick. Patrick listened to the description. Patrick said, "Don't let them in. Don't give them the children. I'll call you back in 3 minutes." Patrick called back in 2.5. "Cliff Sutton," Patrick said. "Garrison." Cliff Sutton's name appeared twice in the documentation Thomas Voss provided. He's not a bystander. He's been providing services for Castellan Capital Group, unspecified services, for 3 years. His office has been used as a mechanism for... Patrick stopped. "He knows where the children are. He knows they're there. Someone told him." Garrison looked at the paper. "He's going to take them," Garrison said. "If he gets his hands on them," Patrick said. "Yes. The emergency foster system is, I don't know how far in the county this goes. I don't know which foster placements are clean and which aren't. So we don't let him take them," Garrison said. "You can't technically," Patrick started. "Patrick," Garrison said. A pause. "I'll have Daphne Ross call the federal investigators right now," Patrick said. "They can issue a federal superseding order, but it's not instant. It could be an hour." "We'll need an hour," Garrison said. He hung up. He went to the door. He opened it. Cliff Sutton was standing on the porch with his 2 colleagues and the piece of paper. He was a medium-sized man with the specific look of someone who was accustomed to his papers being received as the final word on the matter. Garrison looked at him. "I've read your order," Garrison said. "Then you understand," Sutton started. "I understand you've presented a piece of paper," Garrison said. "My lawyer is currently in contact with federal investigators regarding the specific situation of these children, which is a federal matter under active investigation. Until I hear from him that your authority supersedes that, I'm going to ask you to wait." Sutton's expression did the thing that expressions did when authority was politely but completely refused. "Mr. Wade," Sutton said, "this is a legal—" "I know what it is," Garrison said. "I'm telling you that federal jurisdiction may apply, and I'm asking you to wait 1 hour while that's confirmed. If it turns out your order is the operative authority, we'll discuss next steps." Sutton looked at him. He looked at the building behind Garrison. He looked at the parking lot, which contained approximately 40 motorcycles. He looked at Garrison. "1 hour," he said. "I'll come to you," Garrison said. He closed the door. Inside, the room had heard. Not every word, but the register, the quality. 63 people in a building knew something was happening at the door and were calibrated to it. Garrison came back in. He looked at Raymond Briggs. "Get someone to the back of the building," he said. "Make sure the parking lot is visible. If a second vehicle comes or if Sutton tries to send someone around, I want to know." Raymond moved. Garrison looked for Scarlett. She was there. She had come out of the back office at some point and was standing near the wall with Henry beside her. She had heard enough. "Sutton," she said. "You know the name?" Garrison said. "Dad mentioned it once," she said. "He mentioned it in the same register as Castellan." She paused. "He's not here to help us." "No," Garrison said. She held Henry's hand. Henry was looking at Garrison with the expression of a 7-year-old who was reading the situation through the adult's body language and was not liking what he was reading. "What happens?" Henry said. Garrison looked at him. "Nothing bad happens," Garrison said. He said it with the certainty of someone who had decided this was true and was going to make it true. "Nothing bad happens while you're in this building." Henry looked at him. He held up Gerald. He said, "Gerald says, okay." Something moved through the room. 63 people registering a 7-year-old holding up a bear in support of a statement. The specific movement of a room discovering it could be moved by something small. Garrison looked at Gerald. "Gerald's right," he said. "Okay." The hour was 52 minutes. 52 minutes of Daphne Ross on the phone with the federal task force, of Patrick in a 3-way call with the federal prosecutor's office, of Stewart sending texts to contacts who were moving through channels at the speed that channels moved when someone pushed them hard enough. Garrison sat at the table across from Scarlett. "Tell me something else about your father," he said. "Keep talking." She understood what he was doing. "He makes the worst coffee," she said. "He makes it every morning, and every morning it's terrible, and every morning he drinks it like it's fine." She looked at the table. "I asked him once. I said, 'Dad, why don't you learn to make it better?' He said he'd been making it this way since he was 22, and he wasn't going to change now." Garrison almost smiled. "That sounds like a specific kind of stubbornness," he said. "The good kind," she said. "The kind where you've decided on a thing and you're standing by it." "The standing by it kind," Garrison said. "Yes," she said. She looked at him. "You have that too. I can tell." He looked at the door. "Sometimes it's useful," he said. "This is one of those times," she said. The phone rang. It was Patrick. Garrison listened. He said 3 words. "Send it through." He hung up. He went to the door. He opened it. Cliff Sutton was on the porch. He had not left. To his credit or his anxiety, he had stayed. Garrison held out his own phone with the email open. "Federal superseding authority," he said. "These children are under federal protection pending the completion of an active investigation. Your county order has been superseded. Your office will receive formal notification within the hour. I'd encourage you to call your lawyer." Sutton read the email. He read it twice. Something happened in his face. A specific something. The specific change that happened in a face when a plan it had been certain of collapsed. "This isn't," he started. "Goodbye, Mr. Sutton," Garrison said. He closed the door. He turned around. He looked at the room. 63 people, and Scarlett and Henry looked back at him. The room did the specific thing it did when a thing was done. Bernard, at the back, said something under his breath that was not a word exactly, but had the quality of a word. The specific quality of a thing that needed to be said, but that all language was insufficient for. Connie, who was beside Scarlett, put her hand on Scarlett's shoulder. Henry held Gerald up again. This time, the room laughed. The laugh that came out of a difficult thing coming through the other side. Sunday. The federal case moved with the speed of cases that had been building for 18 months and had just received the last piece of evidence they needed. Arrests were made on Sunday morning, not in Millhaven, in Nashville, where the people at the center of Castell and Capital Group's operation were taken into custody in the specific organized way of federal arrests that had been planned and were executed at 5 in the morning before the day could do anything to complicate them. In Millhaven, 2 officers of the police department were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Cliff Sutton was suspended from his county position pending the same. Thomas Voss's federal protection was maintained, but the immediate threat was substantially reduced. The operational network that had been looking for his children had collapsed when the people running it were in custody. Daphne Ross called Patrick at 9 in the morning. Patrick called Garrison. "It's over," Patrick said. "Not every detail, not the trial, but the active threat is over. The people who were looking for the children are in custody." Garrison said, "When can the father see his kids?" Patrick said, "Today, if we arrange it. Daphne Ross can facilitate." "Arrange it," Garrison said. The reunion was at the ironclad clubhouse, which was not the standard venue for a federally protected witness to be reunited with his children, but which was, under the circumstances, the right venue. Thomas Voss arrived at 1 in the afternoon. He was 42 years old, and he had the specific appearance of someone who had been through 4 days of federal protective custody, the exhaustion of a contained space, the specific tension of someone who had been carrying enormous weight. He was not large or imposing. He was an accountant, medium height, brown hair going gray, with green eyes that were his daughter's eyes. He had been wearing the same clothes for 2 days, and his hands were, when he got out of the federal car that had brought him, slightly unsteady. He stood in the parking lot of the ironclad clubhouse. The door opened. Scarlett came out. She came out the way she'd done everything, completely, without half measures. She ran down the steps and across the parking lot, and she hit her father at speed, and he held her the way fathers held children when they had been through the thing he had been through, completely, entirely, without reservation. He held her. She held him. Henry came out behind her, more slowly, with Gerald under one arm, recalibrating the way he recalibrated everything, assessing. His father looked at him over Scarlett's head. Henry looked at his father. He walked across the parking lot. He walked into the hold. The 3 of them were in the parking lot of the ironclad MC Clubhouse in Millhaven, Tennessee, on a Sunday afternoon in October, and the 63 people in the building, because word had spread, as word did in this building, and people who had been doing other things had found their way back, watched through the windows and from the doorway. Garrison stood on the porch. He watched Thomas Voss hold his children. He thought about 2 in the morning and 3 small knocks, and a girl who said, "Hide us, please." He thought about what it cost to ask for help, and what it cost to give it, and what happened in between when both were done properly. He stood on the porch of his building for 17 years, and he watched a family that had been separated and frightened and hunted come back together in his parking lot. And he felt, in the specific place where things of consequence registered, the particular quality of something that had been done right. Thomas Voss came to the door. He looked at Garrison. He put out his hand. "Thomas Voss," he said. "Garrison Wade," Garrison said. They shook hands. Thomas looked at the building. "My daughter knocked on your door," he said. "Yes," Garrison said. "At 2 in the morning," Thomas said. "Yes," Garrison said. "And you took them in," Thomas said. Garrison looked at him. "They asked for help," he said. "That's all." Thomas looked at him. "That's not all," he said. "I know what happened. Daphne Ross told me. The legal work, the federal contact, He stopped. "You kept them safe for 4 days. You kept them safe when someone came with an official document to take them." "We had good people working on it," Garrison said. "I know," Thomas said. "I know about Patrick Walsh. I know about Stewart, your Stewart." He paused. "I know about all of it." He looked at the building again. "She told me," he said. "Scarlett told me. She said she walked to the lights. She said she walked toward the building with the lights on and she knocked on the door." He looked at Garrison. "She said she knew. She said she knew it was the right place." "She's a good reader of situations," Garrison said. "She gets it from her father, apparently." Thomas looked at his children. Scarlett sitting on the step with Henry beside her, Henry with Gerald, both of them in the specific state of people who had put down a weight and were recalibrating to life without it. "I did the right thing," Thomas said. "I found something true, and I said it. That's what I tried to teach them. When you find something true, you say it, even when it's hard." It was the right thing. Garrison said. It cost us 4 days, Thomas said. Yes, Garrison said. And now it's done, Thomas said. Now it's done, Garrison said. Thomas looked at him. I can never... He stopped. You don't need to, Garrison said. I want to... There's nothing to repay, Garrison said. Your daughter knocked on a door. We opened it. That's what doors are for. Thomas pressed his lips together. He nodded once. The specific nod of a man receiving something he couldn't express in any other way. They stayed for dinner. This was Ruth Alderman's doing. She had made the observation at 3 in the afternoon that the Voss family needed to eat a meal together in a space where they were safe before they went anywhere, and that the clubhouse kitchen was fully operational and she was going to use it. Nobody argued with Ruth. The dinner was real food. Ruth's cooking, which was the kind that came from someone who understood that cooking for people was one of the most fundamental forms of care. She cooked enough for 67 people, and there were 67 people, and it was the right amount. They ate at the long tables in the main room. Thomas Voss sat between his children. He had been quiet since arriving, not the quiet of someone absent, but the quiet of someone who was fully present and absorbing everything, filing it in the permanent record. At some point during dinner, he looked at the room. He looked at the 67 people at the tables. He said, loudly enough to carry, I need to say something. The room quieted. He stood up. He was not, by appearance, a commanding figure. He was a medium-height accountant with exhausted eyes and the same clothes 2 days running, and his daughter on one side and his son on the other. He stood up. I want to tell you something about what you did, he said. Not thank you. I've said thank you, and I'll say it again, but that's not what I want to say. He looked at the room. I've been working in numbers my whole career, in the language of numbers. And the thing about numbers is that they're honest. They show you what's true. They don't care about the story you want to tell. He paused. I found a true thing in the numbers. A true and terrible thing. And I could have not seen it. I could have looked away. People do. It's the easier thing. He looked at his children. My daughter walked 3 miles in the dark to find help. My son walked with her without complaining. He looked at the room. And you opened the door. And you stayed up all night. And you kept them safe for 4 days. And you used your contacts and your people and your legal resources to prevent someone with a fake official document from taking them. He stopped. He looked at the room. What I want to say is, I know what the world thinks of people who wear leather and ride motorcycles and meet in clubhouses. I know what they assume. And I want to say in front of all of you that what I know from the evidence, from the true thing that numbers don't lie about, is that the people in this room are better than what most of the world will ever understand. The room was quiet. Henry, beside his father, held Gerald up. The room laughed. The laugh that came from the full weight of 4 days and what had come through them, the release of it in the specific form that laughter took when it carried grief and relief and the confirmation of something that mattered. Garrison sat at the end of the table and he let the laughter happen around him and he looked at Scarlett across the table. She was looking at him. She had the face that 12-year-olds had when they were not being 12, but something older, something that the difficulty of things had made available to them. She said across the table in the laughter, "Thank you." He said, "You knocked." She said, "You answered." He looked at her. "That's the whole thing," he said. She looked at the room, 67 people and her father and her brother with his bear and the food and the specific warmth of a place that had been for 4 days exactly what it needed to be. "Yes," she said. "That's the whole thing." Monday. They left in the morning. The federal situation was ongoing, but the immediate threat was contained, and the Voss family was going to federal housing while the investigation ran its course, a place that was appropriate and safe and removed from Millhaven for the short term. Garrison walked them to the federal car. Henry had Gerald under one arm. He stopped in front of Garrison. He looked up at him. "I'm taking Gerald," Henry said. "Gerald should go with you," Garrison said. Henry nodded. This had been established. Then he did a thing he apparently decided to do without announcing it. He held his arms up. Garrison looked at the 7-year-old with his arms up. He picked him up. Henry put Gerald in the space between them, and he put his other arm around Garrison's neck, and he stayed there for a moment. This small person who had been through something no small person should go through, who had carried a bear through 4 days of it, and had learned to shoot pool, and had named a man's bear, and had said Gerald says okay, in a room full of bikers. He stayed there. Garrison held him. "You're going to be okay," Garrison said. "I know," Henry said. "Gerald knows too." Henry let go. Garrison put him down. Henry went to the car. Scarlett was there. She looked at Garrison. She was 12 years old, and she had walked from the Liberty Motel on Route 9 in the October dark and knocked on a steel door and said, "Hide us, please," and everything that had followed from that. She looked at him. "I'm going to remember this," she said. "So am I," he said. She held his gaze. "When I'm older," she said, "I'm going to do what you do." He looked at her. "What do I do?" he said. "You answer the door," she said. "Whatever's on the other side, you open it." He looked at her. 61 years old, white beard, the specific stillness of a man who had decided things a long time ago and had spent a long time living by them. "That's all it is," he said. "It's not all it is," she said. He looked at her. She was 12 years old and she was right. "No," he said. "It's not." She held out her hand. He shook it, the handshake of someone who was being treated as an equal, who was receiving it the way it was offered. She got in the car. The car went down Route 7. Garrison stood in the parking lot. The October morning was doing its thing, cold and clear, the specific brightness of October that was not warm, but was honest, that showed everything exactly as it was. He stood and watched the car go. Behind him, the door of the ironclad clubhouse was open, the way it was always open, in the specific sense. The sense that mattered, the sense that had meant something 4 days ago, and would mean something again whenever the next thing came. He turned around. He went inside. Afterward. The investigation into Castellan Capital Group resulted in 14 indictments. 3 of them were county officials. 1 was a police captain. 2 were men who had come to Donna's house with real badges. The trial was the following year, and Thomas Voss testified. He testified with the specific, precise clarity of an accountant who had found something true in the numbers and was going to say it, in court, on the record, regardless of what it cost. It cost him 6 months of federal protection and 2 years of rebuilding a practice in a new city, and the specific difficulty of being the person who says the true thing and has to live with having said it. He said, in an interview after the trial, that the thing that had made it possible was knowing his children were safe. That knowing they were safe had freed him to do what needed to be done. That when you knew the people you loved were protected, you could face the thing in front of you with your whole self. The journalist asked him how he'd known they would be safe. He said, "My daughter walked toward the lights." The journalist asked him to explain. He said, "She saw lights in the dark. She walked toward them. She knocked on the door, and the people inside opened it." He looked at the journalist. "That's all I can tell you. Some things are that simple and that hard. She walked toward the lights, and the lights were the right lights." Scarlett Voss wrote a letter to the Ironclad chapter 2 years after. She was 14 by then. The letter was short, she was precise, like her father, and she did not use more words than the thing required. It said, "When I knocked on your door, I didn't know what was on the other side. I knew what I needed, and I knew I had to ask for it, and I was more scared than I've ever been. When the door opened, something happened that I didn't expect. I felt seen. Not in the way where someone looks at you and sees your problem. In the way where someone looks at you and sees you. Sees that you're a person who is asking for something real, and that the something real is worth answering. I've been thinking about that for 2 years, and I think that's what made the difference. Not just the help, the being seen first. Thank you for seeing us." Garrison Wade read the letter at the monthly chapter meeting. He read it to 67 people. The room was quiet after. Then Bernard, at the back, said, "She's going to be something." "She already is," Garrison said. He folded the letter. He put it in his jacket pocket. He looked at the room that had been there, that had assembled in the middle of the night because 2 children knocked on a door, and because 67 people, when it came to the specific moment of it, had answered. He looked at all of them. "Same time next month," he said. The meeting went on. The door of the ironclad clubhouse on Route 7 was, as it had always been, as it would continue to be, available. Open to whoever came toward the light.